There's something almost indescribable about the kind of safety a man feels in the presence of an emotionally mature woman, especially an older woman who has lived, loved, lost, and learned. It's not just about years, it's about what those years have taught her. She doesn't offer love from a place of insecurity or fear. She offers it from a deep well of wisdom. And when a man encounters that, it disarms him in the most unexpected ways. Because men, even those who appear strong, composed, or emotionally distant, carry wounds they rarely speak of. Many have been taught to suppress rather than share, to perform rather than feel, to lead without showing when they are lost. They've been conditioned to be protectors, but rarely protected. So when they meet a woman who doesn't just want their attention, but understands their silence, it changes everything. With her, he doesn't feel like he has to explain every emotion. He doesn't feel like he's on trial for his past or that he must constantly prove his worth. Her presence is calm. Her voice is steady. She doesn't rush intimacy or demand declarations. She listens, not just with her ears, but with her presence. And that presence tells him, you don't have to be perfect to be loved here. Older women know how to create that space. They've moved past the need to chase, fix, or compete. They don't view vulnerability as weakness, nor do they take a man's emotional withdrawal as a personal insult. Instead, they recognize it as a moment, one that calls for grace, not reaction. They know when to speak and when to simply stay, when to ask and when to wait. That balance, rare and powerful, becomes a kind of emotional shelter for a man. And it's not because they tolerate nonsense. Quite the opposite. Older women often have stronger boundaries, clearer expectations, and a deeper understanding of their own worth. But that's what makes the safety even more profound. Because she doesn't offer it out of naivety, she offers it by choice. A man can feel when a woman chooses to accept him, not out of desperation, but from wisdom. In her, he doesn't find chaos. He finds calm. He doesn't find drama. He finds depth. And most of all, he finds something that every soul, no matter how strong, quietly longs for, to be loved without condition, to be known without fear, to be held without judgment. These are the quiet, powerful things older women know. Things that make a man feel not just loved, but safe. And once he feels that, he never forgets it. 1. She doesn't judge his vulnerabilities. When a man feels he can show his vulnerabilities without being judged, it creates a rare and powerful sense of safety within him. Most men are taught from a young age to be strong, silent, and emotionally reserved. They carry this pressure into adulthood, believing they must always be the rock, the provider, the problem solver. Because of that, they rarely open up. They fear being seen as weak, needy, or less masculine. But when an older woman, grounded in emotional maturity and experience, offers him a space where he can let that guard down, something transformative happens. He begins to trust in a way that goes beyond words. He feels like he can breathe without pretending. He doesn't have to edit his thoughts or filter his pain. He can share his fears, insecurities, doubts, and wounds without bracing for criticism or silence. She doesn't mock his tears or tell him to man up. She doesn't compare him to someone else or use his admissions against him later. Instead, she listens with her heart, receives his truth gently, and shows him that being vulnerable doesn't make him less of a man. It makes him more human. This kind of emotional freedom is rare, and men remember it. Long after the moment passes, they carry that feeling with them, the memory of being fully seen and still fully accepted. That's why a man can grow deeply attached to a woman who doesn't judge his vulnerabilities. In her presence, he doesn't have to perform or pretend. He can be honest about his failures, his trauma, or his past without being defined by it. For many men, this level of safety is unfamiliar, and once they experience it, they don't want to lose it. It becomes a kind of emotional homecoming. They begin to trust not just the woman, but themselves around her. They open up more. They soften. They bond. And it's not just about emotional sharing. It shows in how he holds her hand a little tighter when he's stressed. How he looks at her a little longer after he speaks. How he stays quiet a few extra minutes, just to exist near someone who makes him feel accepted in his whole truth, not just the parts that look impressive. That's the gift of a woman who never judges his vulnerabilities. 2. She listens without interrupting. When a woman listens without interrupting, she creates a space where a man feels valued, understood, and truly heard, something many men rarely experience. In a world that often tells them to get to the point, or that their feelings don't matter, uninterrupted listening becomes a form of quiet love. It's not just about silence, it's about presence. It's about the way she leans in, makes eye contact, and allows his thoughts to unfold without rushing, correcting, or redirecting. For a man, especially one who's used to holding everything inside, this is powerful. He may start cautiously, testing the waters with small details. But when she doesn't cut him off or offer instant solutions, he begins to relax. He starts sharing more. Her patience becomes permission. Her stillness gives him the courage to speak more freely. He doesn't feel like he's in a debate or an interview. He feels like he's in a sanctuary. Men often carry stories they've never told, about past pain, unspoken fears, silent doubts. When he finds a woman who listens without trying to fix, analyze, or judge, those stories begin to rise. He starts to trust that she's not just waiting for her turn to speak. She's not trying to win or prove a point. She's simply there, to understand, not to control. And in that moment, he feels seen. Not just heard, but truly seen. It's not about nodding or pretending to pay attention. It's about that quiet focus that says, your voice matters to me. Your feelings matter to me. You matter to me. Over time, this creates emotional safety. He feels less guarded, less defensive. He doesn't need to raise his voice or explain himself twice. He knows that with her, he won't be interrupted or dismissed. That kind of listening builds intimacy, trust, and loyalty. It softens his walls and deepens his connection to her. And afterward, it's not uncommon for him to say things he's never said to anyone. Not because she asked the right question, but because she offered the rare gift of uninterrupted presence. In that stillness, he doesn't just feel heard. He feels loved. 3. She respects his space. When a woman respects a man's space, she shows him that love doesn't have to come with pressure, control, or constant closeness. Instead of clinging tightly or needing constant reassurance, she trusts the rhythm of the relationship. She understands that solitude doesn't mean rejection, and that stepping back sometimes is a way to move forward. This kind of emotional intelligence tells a man that he is free to breathe, to think, and to process life in his own way, without fear of being guilt or misunderstood. Many men recharge in silence. They think through things alone. It's not personal, it's their nature. When a woman gives him that space without assuming the worst, without sending anxious messages or demanding explanations, it calms his nervous system. He doesn't feel smothered. He doesn't feel like he's under surveillance. He feels trusted. And in turn, that trust often pulls him closer. What she's really saying with that space is, I don't need to be in every moment of your mind to still matter in your heart. That's rare. Most people confuse attention with affection. But a woman who respects space understands that time apart can be just as sacred as time together. She doesn't chase when he's quiet. She doesn't accuse when he's distant. Instead, she offers quiet confidence. And that confidence becomes magnetic. This makes him miss her in a deeper way, not out of guilt or obligation, but out of genuine longing. He remembers her grace, her patience, her emotional maturity. And when he returns, because he always does, he's not just coming back from space. He's coming back to someone who made that space feel safe. Over time, that becomes a form of emotional safety he doesn't want to live without. Because in that space, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt honored. He didn't feel forgotten. He felt respected. And that makes her stand out. Not because she held on tightly, but because she knew when to let go with love. 4. She stays calm during conflict. When a woman stays calm during conflict, she becomes a grounding force in moments when everything feels uncertain or emotionally charged. Arguments and disagreements are natural in any relationship, but how a person responds in those tense moments reveals the emotional climate they create. A woman who can remain composed when tensions rise sends a powerful signal. Not just that she's in control of her emotions, but that the relationship is safe even when it's under pressure. For a man, this calmness can be deeply reassuring. Many men have grown up in environments where anger meant chaos, raised voices meant danger, and conflict meant something was about to break. So when he finds a woman who doesn't explode, who doesn't yell, slam doors, or threaten to leave the moment something goes wrong, it changes how he experiences conflict altogether. It tells him, this won't spiral. We can work through this. I'm not here to destroy you when I'm hurt. I'm here to understand. That steadiness allows him to speak more honestly. He doesn't feel like he has to walk on eggshells. He doesn't have to shut down or become defensive. Her calmness gives him space to reflect, not react. And more than that, it teaches him emotional regulation by example. She doesn't need to match his volume. She doesn't weaponize his emotions. She holds space for the storm without becoming the storm. And this isn't about being passive. She can disagree. She can challenge. She can stand her ground. But she does it with dignity. She knows her worth doesn't live in screaming to be heard. Her strength is quiet, but it speaks volumes. She doesn't escalate. She diffuses. She doesn't punish. She seeks peace without surrendering her truth. Over time, this creates a deep sense of trust. He knows that no matter how heated things get, she won't emotionally abandon him. She won't make the conflict bigger than the love. And that makes him respect her even more, not just as a partner, but as a woman who brings clarity when everything else feels confusing. In a world where so many react out of impulse, her calm becomes unforgettable. It's not just soothing, it's empowering. Because in that stillness, he learns that real love doesn't shout. It listens, breathes, and stays, even in the middle of a storm. 5. She communicates clearly and kindly. When a woman communicates clearly and kindly, she creates a relationship environment where misunderstandings shrink and connection deepens. Her words become a bridge instead of a barrier. She doesn't play guessing games or speak in code. She doesn't expect him to read her mind or punish him with silence. Instead, she chooses honesty, but wraps it in softness. She says what she means without using sharp edges. She's direct, but never demeaning. She corrects without crushing. And this makes all the difference. For a man, this kind of communication is rare and refreshing. Many men struggle with emotional expression, not because they don't care, but because they weren't taught how to articulate their feelings. So when a woman speaks with clarity and kindness, it gives him permission to do the same. He doesn't have to decode her tone. He doesn't have to second-guess her mood. She tells him what's wrong without turning it into a weapon. She asks for what she needs without making him feel like a failure. And even when she's upset, she stays respectful. She may feel hurt, disappointed, or frustrated, but she chooses to communicate in a way that protects both her dignity and his. She doesn't raise her voice just to feel powerful. She doesn't belittle or shame just to be heard. Instead, she anchors herself in emotional intelligence. And that quiet strength becomes something he begins to admire deeply. Because of her clarity, problems are solved faster. Because of her kindness, trust grows stronger. He feels like he can talk to her without being attacked. He can admit when he's wrong without being humiliated. He knows that even in disagreement, she's not trying to win. She's trying to connect. And the ripple effect of this is enormous. He becomes more open. He mirrors her tone. He listens more, reacts less. Not out of fear, but because her calm, clear, kind communication invites maturity from him too. She doesn't just speak well. She teaches him how to speak better. Over time, this creates a relationship dynamic that feels safe, respectful, and real. There's no manipulation, no guessing, no walking on eggshells. Just two people meeting in truth, held together by words that heal instead of hurt. In that space, love isn't just felt, it's heard, understood, and trusted. 6. She supports his purpose, not just his potential. When a woman supports a man's purpose, not just his potential, she shows him that she sees the man he is, not just the man he could be. Potential is future-based. It's a vision, a hope, a maybe. But purpose lives in the present. It's what drives him today, what gives him meaning now, even if the world hasn't recognized it yet. And when a woman stands beside that purpose, when she respects it and nurtures it, she becomes more than a partner. She becomes part of his foundation. Most men are used to people loving their ambition, but not always respecting the grind it takes to get there. They are praised for their dreams, but often doubted during the slow, silent steps required to reach them. But when a woman supports his purpose, she's not just waiting for the day he makes it. She's present in the process. She encourages the late nights, the early mornings, the endless work he puts in, even when it's not glamorous. She believes in the mission, not just the outcome. This kind of support hits differently. It fuels him. It strengthens his focus. It builds a deepest sense of loyalty, because he knows her belief isn't conditional on his success. She's not with him if he becomes someone great. She's with him because she sees greatness in what he's already building. And he feels that difference. He hears it in her words, sees it in her patience, and feels it in the way she asks questions about his work with genuine interest. She doesn't try to rewrite his purpose. She doesn't compete with it or make him choose between love and calling. She aligns with it. She respects the part of him that's driven by something bigger than himself. And that respect becomes a quiet kind of power. It makes him want to share more, build more, be more. Not because he needs to prove anything, but because he finally feels understood. Over time, that connection creates a bond that goes beyond romance. It's rooted in partnership, vision, and shared belief. He knows he can rise with her beside him, not just because she cheers for him at the finish line, but because she walks with him every step of the climb. She doesn't fall in love with a fantasy. She commits to the journey. And to a man with purpose, that means everything. 7. She sets healthy boundaries. When a woman sets healthy boundaries, she teaches a man how to love her with respect, not assumption. She's not cold or controlling. She's clear. She doesn't build walls to shut him out. She builds gates that open with trust and close with disrespect. Her boundaries aren't threats. They're self-respect in action. And this clarity, far from pushing a man away, often draws him in deeper. Because instead of guessing what's okay and what's not, he learns how to show up in a way that honors her emotional space. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are invitations to connect more honestly. And when she expresses hers calmly and confidently, it shows emotional maturity. She doesn't wait for him to cross a line before speaking up. She communicates where the line is ahead of time, with grace, not guilt. She doesn't allow mistreatment under the name of love. She doesn't abandon her needs just to avoid conflict. And because of this, she builds a relationship where both people feel safe to be themselves without stepping on each other. For a man, this is deeply attractive. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, grounding way. He sees that she values herself, and that teaches him how to value her too. Her boundaries challenge him, in the best way. They ask him to grow, to be thoughtful, to pay attention. And in doing so, he becomes a better partner, not just for her, but in how he carries himself in the world. She's not afraid to say no, but she says it with kindness. She can walk away from situations that no longer serve her, but she does it without burning everything down. Her strength isn't in how loud she speaks. It's in how deeply she knows her worth. And that strength becomes magnetic. He respects her more because she respects herself. Over time, he realizes that her boundaries don't create distance. They create clarity. There's no silent resentment, no hidden tension, just a clear understanding of what love looks like for her. And the beauty of that clarity is that it gives both people the chance to show up with more honesty, more safety, and more depth. In a world that often rewards self-sacrifice and people-pleasing, a woman who sets healthy boundaries becomes unforgettable, not because she demands attention, but because she inspires a higher form of love. One that's rooted in truth, not fear. One that lasts, because it's built on real understanding. 8. She honors his silence. When a woman honors a man's silence, she gives him something rare, peace without pressure. Not every emotion comes with words, and not every moment needs to be filled. Some men process quietly. They think in stillness. They retreat, not to hide, but to heal. And when she understands that, when she doesn't take his quiet personally or try to pull words out of him before he's ready, she earns his trust in a way that words never could. She doesn't assume silence means distance. She doesn't flood him with questions or fill the space with her own fears. Instead, she offers presence, a quiet kind of companionship. She might sit near him without expecting conversation. She might check in gently without forcing an answer. She lets him know she's there, but she doesn't rush his return. And that patience becomes a language of its own. For a man, this kind of grace is unforgettable. He's used to people asking what's wrong the moment he grows quiet. He's used to being pushed, misunderstood, or judged for needing time. But with her, silence isn't something to be fixed. It's something to be respected. He feels safe enough to go inward, knowing he won't be punished for needing space. In honoring his silence, she shows emotional intelligence. She doesn't need constant conversation to feel secure. She trusts the bond even when the room is quiet. That trust allows him to process his emotions at his own pace. And when he's ready to speak, he knows he won't be met with resentment, only warmth. Over time, this changes how he sees her, not just as a lover or a friend, but as someone who understands the rhythm of his soul. She doesn't demand explanations for every mood. She doesn't treat quiet as absence. She treats it as part of who he is. And in doing so, she gives him something deeper than attention. She gives him emotional freedom. That kind of woman becomes a haven, because in her presence, he can be silent without being invisible. He can be still without feeling lost. And when he finally speaks, his words come from a place of trust, not obligation. Because she waited, not for answers, but for honesty. And that makes all the difference. 9. She never weaponizes his past against him. When a woman never weaponizes a man's past against him, she shows him a love that is safe, mature, and rooted in true acceptance. Everyone has a history, regrets, mistakes, heartbreaks, and failures. For many men, those chapters are hard to talk about. They've been judged for them, shamed by them, or reminded of them during moments of conflict. But when he meets a woman who listens to his past and chooses not to use it as ammunition later, he feels something different. He feels emotionally protected. She doesn't bring up old wounds just to win arguments. She doesn't say, "You always do this. Oh, that's just like what you did before." She doesn't twist his vulnerabilities into weapons. Instead, she lets the past stay in the past. Not because she forgets it, but because she honors the courage it took for him to share it in the first place. She knows his history shaped him, but she doesn't use it to define him. She focuses on who he's becoming, not who he used to be. That level of emotional restraint builds deep trust. He doesn't have to hold back out of fear that one day his truth will be thrown in his face. He knows he can open up without being trapped by his own words. He knows that if he confesses something painful, she'll hold it with care, not control. And that makes him share even more, slowly but deeply, over time. In moments of tension, she chooses compassion over cruelty. She doesn't dig up old mistakes to hurt him. She doesn't keep score. She knows that love isn't a court case, it's a safe place. And when she offers that kind of grace, it brings out the best in him. Not because he's perfect, but because he finally feels free to grow without fear of being punished for who he used to be. This kind of love doesn't forget, but it forgives. It sees flaws, but doesn't weaponize them. And in that gentle strength, a man finds something he rarely experiences: peace in vulnerability. He learns that being known doesn't have to mean being controlled. And that lesson, quiet, powerful, unforgettable, becomes the reason he never wants to let her go. Because in her eyes, he's not a mistake waiting to happen again. He's a man becoming something better, with someone who truly believes he can.